programming, you now start using out, trying to use codes to do some things, right? So what low code programming does, it gives us that space where we can perform the standard programmings, right, by basically dragging and dropping, or using what I tend to call using functions, right? Because that's what it is on the line, right? So let's the idea of Power Automate also comes to bear, when the IT, you get to do repetitive tasks, right? You come in every day, you check your mails, you look at what happened the previous day and all that, right? So these repetitive tasks, let's say a new user comes in to the company, you create a user account, add them to groups, send them their password, do this and do that, right? So you do that, let's say every week, you do that for 20 persons. Every week, you do that for 20 persons, right? So what Power Automate comes to bring is to bring out a situation where you can automate those tasks, to function or to happen without your input, right? You once you set up the underlying process, you set up the triggers, you set up the actions that need to perform when, and you create such flows that would help you, do this or do that, right? So why I also mentioned Power Automate, it's integrate with every other application, right? Because most of the actions cut into Exchange, most of the actions cut into SharePoint, most of the actions cut into Teams, right? And for you to be able to make use of Power Automate, you need to have at least a Power Automate admin rights, right? So currently I have a test tenant that has a global admin privilege per se, right? So with a global admin right, it gives you every other administrative privileges within an organization, right? So although most Power Apps developers do just get the Power Automate admin rights, just so that they don't get to, fiddle with other aspects of the business, right? So on my screen, you would see where it says create your automation with Copilot, right? So I might be wrong with the dates, but I think it's 2023, 2024, the advent of Copilot, the AI craze started, with the GPT and the Chat GPT weren't right. So Copilot is one of the AI solutions Microsoft has, right? It does a whole lot, right? It integrates into Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, even Power Automate also, SharePoint, So Copilot is more of, just like the name sounds, it's more of a Copilot. It helps you get work done faster and smarter, right? So if we had this training, let's say last year or 2023, you might not see the screen, right? What this does, it helps you design a flow, right? So you want to create an automation with Copilot, you can just write out what you want Copilot to do for you, right? Give me one sec. I just want to look at my curriculum just to be sure we're flowing with it. Because I don't want to jump into the deep end and then I get to lose everyone. So, but at any point you feel lost, you have any questions, do well to stop me, right? And then I would stop on my tracks and then see how I can, explain stuffs to you the best I can. So give me one sec. Okay, yeah. So I've explained what the benefits of automations are, right? So I don't know how familiar we are with the term automation, right? So automation is just basically creating activities that happen without your direct input, right? Automating a task, right? So let's say you keep doing a particular task every day manually, right? So what automations does, it helps you configure whatever the case may be. So in before now, we had in SharePoint, we had what we called automations, right? You want to create automations that do certain approval requests and the likes, right? So the idea is basically those tasks you do, right? I want to make them automatic, right? I don't want to interfere with them again, right? So now, how it relates to Power Automate is that we want to alleviate, be it a user, be it a team, be it IT department themselves, right? We want to alleviate that particular tax, depending on what examples we want to go by, right? So in Power Automate, we have uh, various processes where an automation comes to play, right? So we have what we call basically triggers. What will trigger an automation? I think someone's microphone is on. Okay, so in automations within Microsoft, right? So we have what we call triggers, right? Triggers are basically what activity do you want to happen, and then an automation would kick into play, right? So we have automations that are triggered manually, right? So manual automations are automations that you need to come into here and then click on run for it to perform that activity you want it to do, right? So manual automations would require an admin, to trigger that particular action, right? Then we have automatic flows that get triggered based on an activity, right? So we have manual automation, and then we have activity-based automation, right? So what activities does it track, right? If a Microsoft form is submitted, if an item is added in a SharePoint list per se, if an email comes into a mailbox, right? And the list goes on, right? So there are automations that get triggered when an activity happens, right? And then an action needs to take place before they get triggered. And once they get triggered, the automation itself doesn't stop until it goes through, the line of flows that have been set for that particular task to get completed, right? And then for automations, we also have repetitive automations that get triggered. Maybe you want an automation to run every 6 hours. You want an automation to run every week on Monday by 9 a.m., right? So those are time-based automations, right? So we have the manual one, then we have the activity-based automation, and then we have the time-based automations, right? So this range of automations are what would come to play depending on the task you at hand, depending on what you want to achieve, right? Uh, so yeah, that's about it in terms of theory, right? So while we play around these, so I just want to confirm, right? How many of us have access to uh I don't know, Rafa, do the students have access to, like while I, showcase this, do they have a trial space they can, work in?
I'm not sure the test account we have
Okay.
that tenant. I'm
Maybe
not sure
maybe you
what
can
is.
sign in. Every tenant should have access to Power Submit free. So can we sign in to check?
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay, yeah, because it's the trick in learning Power Automate, Power Apps, or whatever. Basically, it's trying it out, right? So if you don't get to try it out, you won't get better at it, right? Because most of the things I've learned, I'm actually self-taught, so I like learning on my own, right? So irrespective of being self-taught, it's still YouTube videos by other people, I get to consume and all. So, but if you have a space where you could, try it out yourself and then we'll see how that goes, right? So let me, I don't know, let me continue, right? So yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, for you to have access to the Power Automate, the create space, right? You need to have admin rights, right? So if so, and I also mentioned I have access to a trial tenant where I have global admin rights, right? So I can access the Power Admin, the Power Automate Admin Center via either directly from the admin center, right? I click on this, expand this, right? We go down, uh, all admin center, right? I get brought here, and then I click on Power Automate, right? Click on this. It takes a while to, standard Microsoft process. It takes a while to load this, and then based on your network connectivity. Okay, so this is basically the back end where we get to set stuffs up. In our class for tomorrow, I would show us how relevant this is, right? Because so this is the environment that gets created. The first time you probably uh, create a tenant, right? It gives you this environment, where you need to set up what environment you want to create. Within each of these environments, you want to create the solutions within them, right? So I'll show how that happens. Okay, sorry, I think someone is raising their hands up. Who's this? Omo. Oh, maybe you unmute yourself. Oh, it says no audio. Yeah, maybe drop your questions in the chat. Uh, I don't think your audio device is connected, right? Okay, so that's the admin center for Power, the general Power Platform, right, where you could set, some kind of granular settings, right? So, but for designing flows, playing around this, you need to just type in make.powerautomate.com into the browser. So I've gotten used to this, that I've forgotten how to get to this page from the GUI. Maybe I'll figure that out tomorrow. Hi, Rafiah. You have your hands up.
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted the mentees to know that I've just assigned the Power Platform admin role to them. So for those that would like to repro while you explaining, they can sign into their M365 test tenant account and proceed with the with the Power Platform admin center so they can also
Okay.
go through what you're doing. Thank you.
Okay, cool stuff. So yeah, so to access the playground for Power Automate, where you get to create flows, update your flows and the likes, you just need to type in make.powerautomate.com on the URL. And like I mentioned, there's a way to get through to this particular page using the GUI, but I'll figure it out tomorrow. I've forgotten how it's done, right? So yeah, so you get this page on the landing page for the Power Automate, right, where it gives you the access to use Copilot. So get started by selecting an example of or describing what you want to happen, right? And this works based on the prompt you give it, right? So let's say, like just like this suggested example, you want a time-based flow every week. Post a message to a chat or a channel, right? So you have a message you want to remind your team about, you want them to, so you create a flow that does that, right? So with Copilot, you just click on this, let's say, right? So with Copilot, once you fed it what it needs to do, right, it gives you a sample of what the flow would look like, right? So this is a recurrent flow, post a message in a channel, and all that. So if this is what you want to do, you click on keep it and continue, right? So but I want to get us to a space where we understand what this is to start with, right? So let's get back. Right. So, like I mentioned earlier, when I said, so we have different types of flows, right? Uh, so, like as we can see from here, right? So, if you want to start from scratch from and all that, so this is an automated cloud flow, right? So this is triggered by a designated event, right? So it gets triggered when something happens, when something you specify, happens. I think So I think if you have a question, just drop it on the chat, right? I'll get back to it. I see some persons having their hands up, right? So these are automations that get triggered when an event happens, right? You have the instant cloud flow, which gets triggered manually. So you just need to click on it, run, and then it runs, right? So we also have those scheduled cloud flow that gets triggered based on, you know, timeline, daily, weekly, 6 hours, every 6 hours, monthly, and the likes, right? So those are the three building blocks of flows. Any majorly every flows you have falls into this three category, right? So this is just basically for telling you about AI and the likes, Copilot, how to describe the flow, and then it gets designed, right? And then the other thing you get familiar with is templates, right? So there are built-in templates that Microsoft has put into Power Automate itself, right? Where you can just click on them and then build from it, right? So you can either build from scratch or you build from an existing, flow per se, right? Yeah. So those are the basic. Yeah, so down here you have a list of you know templates that you can choose from, right? So then something else. So yeah, in Flow, in Power Automate, we also have what we call connectors, right? Like I mentioned earlier, Power Automate also cuts into the M365 fabric, right? Where it's, depending on what you want to do, it needs access to, let's say, Exchange. So it needs a connector to it needs a file you want to pick it from OneDrive. It needs a connection to OneDrive, right? Uh, it needs an item from a Microsoft form. It needs connection to Microsoft form using via Exchange, right? And then SharePoint if attachment is enabled on that. So these are the list of connectors, that Power Automate can go in and fetch. Power BI, you can go into Power BI. You have an SQL database, RSS feed, the list actually goes on, right? On connectors, right? So let's start with a very basic flow that would be manually triggered. So I just want to give more of a heads up, right? So currently caught between two meetings. So today's meeting might be a bit short, just so that we can have a longer time for tomorrow, right? So I'll just do more of an intro today, whet our appetite, and then for tomorrow's class, we'll just dive straight into solving real life problems with Power Automates. Just more of a heads up, right? Thank you in advance, right? So let's start from blank and say we want to create a manual triggered flow, right? So first things first, you need to name your flow, right? So I just want to do something very basic, just so we can understand. While I do that, I'll just explain what each of those do, right? All right, so let's give this a name. Uh, Send an email, right? Okay, choose how to trigger this flow. So we want to create, a manual flow. So this manually triggers the flow button. Okay. Manually trigger a flow. Okay. Create. Okay. So what do I want to achieve with this, right? So before you start out, creating anything, right? So you just need to do so you need to know what you want to achieve, right? You need to know what you want to achieve, draw out a plan of what you want to do, right? That would help you know what functions to call, when to call them, the configurations to apply on them, right? So I just want to create a very simple flow that when you click on it, it sends an email to a specific email address, right? Just something very basic, right? Just so that we can bit of understand how add an action. Let's say, what action do I want to add? Send an email. Show my box. Send an email version 2, right? Now I want to, so for each of this, right, when you select any of the items, it brings up the configurations for that particular, item, that action on the left, right? So you can configure it, right? So since I've selected the option of send an email, right? It gives us this interface where we could set the to, the subject, the body, right? And yeah, so this is already connected. So I've already created a connection. So when you just after getting assigned the license, the permission Rafiah mentioned, and you come to this page and click on create, it might bring up a screen that says approve connections, right? So you just need to approve, sign in and all that, so that it gives you access, right? So I'm connected to Exchange using this account, right? So this is the account I've created for and it's actually on this account I want to send an email to. So let me just copy this out just for ease of reference, right? So let's bear in mind what we're creating now is just a manual flow that gets triggered when we click on run, right? So I want, whenever I do this, so that it sends an email to this particular email address. You could add as many email address and say, give it a subject. This flow is manually triggered. Idea. Right. So just fill out those section, and then uh I'll show us what this items here. This is a dynamic content. When we add a function to whatever. So, but this is just plain basic send an email flow that we're trying to create, right? Importance. I want to set the importance of the email to high or low, depending on what you want to do. Yeah, so that's pretty basic for sending email, right? That's just all you have to deal with at this point, right? Yeah, so once you're done with configuring each action item, right, and you're done, just click on save. Okay, so it's your flow is ready, and we recommend to test it, right? So now I want to test this particular flow. I click on test manually, and then I click on test, right? Okay, so this just gives you like more of a, this flow uses the following apps. A green check means so it's Office 365 for Outlook, right? So I say continue, and then run flow, right? So the flow has started, like it's been triggered to run, right? How do we know if it has run? I think I've gotten an email already, right? Okay, let's see. I need to welcome to Outlook on the same mailbox. right? So I see in my mailbox, I already have an email, just like what we typed earlier, right? Hi there and all that, with high importance, right? The tag on the email is set as high importance, so that it's at the top there with this exclamation mark and all that, right? So that's for a manually triggered flow, right? So you have to go in to do that, right? So manual triggers flow come into place when there is a repetitive task that doesn't get changed, right? So let's say you come in every morning and then you need to send a particular email to a fixed amount of persons, right? You might just want to create a manual flow, configure it the way you want to configure it. So if you will notice, this email is coming from myself to myself, right? So it comes from myself to myself because I'm the one designing the flow, right? So I'm the one creating the flow, so it comes from myself, right? So when we get deep into automate, we would also see how we can make a flow that comes from a different email address, right? Just to make it look uniform and all that, right? So this is that for manually triggered flows, right? So and this is just very basic to send an email, and all that, right? So let's see, right? So let's go back, right? So if you go back and then you click on my flows, it gives you a list of flows that you've created, right? Don't show me this again. Right. So it gives you a list of flows that you have created, right? So these flows that are grayed out are flows that have been disabled, right? So you have the right to select a flow, you know, edit. Am I doing that right? I don't think I'm doing that right. Okay. Yeah. So click on my flows, send an email, click on it, right? And then you can turn this off, right? So once I turn this off, so for manual flows, basically you might not even need to disable them, right? Because they only get triggered if you click on them, right? So, and in this case, this is a manual flow. So these are basically used for scheduled flow or action-based flows, right? Which get triggered when something happens. So this is one way to turn flows off. So all these flows, I've actually turned them off based on I no longer use them. The project I needed them for have elapsed, right? So this is a leave request flow for when someone requests for a leave and all that. Yada yada yada. So yeah, cool. So this is for manually triggered flows, right? Flows that you trigger manually, right? Then we have the automated. Okay, let's work with the scheduled cloud flows. These are flows that gets triggered uh, based on the scheduled timing, right? So we won't do much here, right? I just want to show you how that works, right? So this is run this flow. It gives you when do you want to run the flow? Do you want this flow to repeat? And all that, right? So just set that, and then it gets triggered. Now we have the automated cloud flow, right? Uh, which gets triggered by an event, right? So let's give this. So ignore my choice of naming, right? Yeah. So these are the available triggers, right? The list is quite exhaustive, right? What do you want to trigger this flow? When a new response is submitted, where does it fall into? Microsoft Forms, right? So it makes use of Microsoft Forms and happens when a new item gets submitted, right? This is another form when an item gets created within SharePoint. So it could be a SharePoint document library, it could be a SharePoint list. Yeah, when an item gets created, right? You have another one that says when an item is created or modified, right? So these are all uh, within SharePoint, right? When a file is created within OneDrive, when a file is created, when an item is created, speaks about SharePoint. When a file is created, speaks about OneDrive. And within SharePoint, a file could be the item. Within SharePoint, a list item could be the item also, right? So it depends on which space you're trying to play in, and then it gives you what the activity to you'd get to do that with, right? Okay, so let's click on. I'm just trying to create a very simple flows for our class today, just so that we can uh, get to be the balance of what the experience is, right? So let's say I want to a flow that sends me an email every time a file gets created within my OneDrive account, right? So each time I create a file in my OneDrive account, I need an email to confirm that particular file being created, right? So let's select this flow when a file gets created and click on create. Okay, cool. So when a file gets created, that's the action, right? Now I need to select this. So this flow would actually run because I've selected OneDrive. So it's looking at my OneDrive account, right? So it's looking at my own OneDrive account, right? So we would also see where we want it to happen on a particular user's OneDrive and all that, or maybe a general SharePoint site that. So for OneDrive, it happens on my own OneDrive, right? So let me see if I have one sec. Let me check out the OneDrive on this account. One to my files. So let me create a folder. Let me create a folder. Okay. Let's work with this folder, my Power Automate files, right? So I need to select a folder. So it's looking at my unique identifier of the folder. Okay, one sec. Let me see if it accepts this. Okay, when a file gets created every 1 minute, right? So how often do I want to check for items being added to this folder every 1 minute, right? Okay, cool. So now, when a file is created, right, what do I want to do, right? I want to send an email to an email address, informing this person that, hey, this is the file, a file has been created, this is the name of the file, and all that, right? So I need to select the send email option that we used earlier. Send an email version 2. Hold for this to populate. Who do I want to send an email to? I want to send an email to, let me see. Done on this. Okay, I want to send an email to this guy. My email address. Control C. Okay, so one other thing to note is so there's what we call inheritance in flows, right? So I've created a trigger for when an item is created, and then I've specified the folder, right, where it needs to get. Okay, I think I need to catch get. Okay, let's cancel this. Right. So there's if an item gets created, it automatically gets the item details, right? What's the file name, the size, and stuff like that, right? Uh, right. So that when you come here, this dynamic content here, right? What's the file identifier, the file name, say, hey, jump, you have a new file named, right? Add this dynamic content. What's the file name? In added to the folder my Power Automate flows, right? It was created by so and so. File, okay, I think just right. So this happens, right? For when I add a file, right? So it just says, hey, this file has been created, and this is the link to the file, right? So how were we able to get the file name, the file part is, so there's what we call dynamic entries, right? So when you call an activity, right? When you call an activity, it automatically catches the entries that trigger that particular activity, right? So I call an activity of when a file is created. So right, so it needs to know that file that has been created, and then what do you want me to do with this information that I have, right? So I wanted to send an email, right? So that's why I'm able to select the dynamic this button here, enter dynamic data from the previous step, right? So these are step-by-step flows that for every step it has every step has an output that you can use for the next step as inputs, right? So that for this, right? So I want us to do this, and I want to let's save, right? So each time you save a flow, it goes through. Please, you are missing a connection for when a file is created. Please select a valid connection or create a new connection from connection tab. Okay. Okay, one sec. This should be connected. I think there's a mismatch with my account. It's not seeing my account for some strange reasons that I need to troubleshoot. Change connection. This is already connected. There's no connection. Create a new one. No, join business. Okay. So give me 1 sec. Let me try to reconnect to my OneDrive account. Okay, cool. Okay, so this was actually meant to actually load into my OneDrive account where I see the list of folders. But I wanted to type it in manually. Let me see my Power Automate files. Okay, here. This is the folder I want to use. Right. So each time you save a flow, there's an automatic flow checker that runs through your flow to confirm if the logic, the operations you've said, the configurations you've said are actually correct, and then before it transits to the next stage, right? So let's hit on save again and see if that goes through. Okay, so your flow is ready, and we recommend you to test it, right? So here we go. So for automatically triggered flows, right, I can't test if I don't perform that particular activity, right? I can click on test, but then it won't see anything to work with, right? So since the action that we've said is when a file gets created, let's manually create a file here, right? So let's say new. I want to create a new okay, let's go over it this way, right? I just want to do something that would actually trigger something, right? So let's create a new file on my desktop that is not linked to my OneDrive. I want to create a new Excel workbook, and I want to call this workbook Itoje, right? It doesn't need to have anything actually in it, right? So let me just drag this. 1 sec. Let me drag this and drop inside of this folder, right? It would upload that particular file, right? So I've added a file in that folder, and this should automatically trigger that flow, right? So one other good thing you'd get to find out with flows is that from here you can actually see uh, the run history. How often, when was the last time this flow ran, and those kind of information. Let's see if okay. Okay. I uploaded the file. When an item is created, yeah, this should have triggered that. Let me refresh. Doesn't want me to, okay, yeah. So I should have an email in my mailbox. Okay, cool. So here we go. We have an email in my mailbox that says, hey champ, you have a new file named this being created on the folder this. So you need to on this to access your drive automate. This is not clickable, right? So, but basically, we get the idea, right? So this is a flow that gets triggered when I upload a file or I create a file within a particular OneDrive folder, right? So this is now triggered by an action, right? So with this, you can start having ideas of, okay, so I want to capture the entries in a Microsoft form. When a form gets created, I want it to do this and do that, right? So now you now need parameters, right, that you need to work with. So one other thing I would just want us to just go read up later today, uh, basic programming logic. If this happen, do this, else do this other one, repeat this if this is, so those basic programming logic still comes to play, because when you draw out your playbook on what you want to achieve, you still need to having to account the start goal and your end goal, right? So we need to draw out all these for the process to be just to have a start and a finish process, right? So like I mentioned earlier, first things you need to draw out what you want to achieve with the power with the flow. So this Power Automate itself just basically enhances your work, right? It makes your work easier, right? So what are your pain points? What are your day-to-day pain points? Power Automate helps you, draw out a process where those particular pain points are actually resolved programmatically, right? So you need to understand what you do. You need to understand what you do. You need to understand what you want to achieve, and then draw out a plan on how to get that. And then you can use the available, steps, actions, connectors to get that particular action, the particular result you want to achieve. Do we have any questions at this point? So let me see if. Okay. I don't think, I don't know if there's anyone that's dropped a question that I've not yet to answer. Okay. Do you have any questions? Any questions at all from anyone? Because like I mentioned earlier, I would have to drop here, Rafiah, please. So I'm just want to take an excuse. Caught in between two responsibilities this evening. One came up abruptly, so just have to handle. So if do you have any questions that I can do just address, just based on the few stuff we've seen today. Tomorrow we'll dive into solving two real life problems. So it will be more interactive, right? For tomorrow's class, I would want maybe have a quiet space just so that we can share ideas, while we arrive at a particular destination, right? So tomorrow we might be looking at how to using Power Automate to capture the entries from a Microsoft form, create an item on a list, send out an approval. You want someone to approve a particular action if before it continues to the next, step on that flow. A flow can be paused based because it's waiting for an entry from a particular step, right? So I want a flow to do this. If this happens, so the flow gets stuck at that point until that particular activity happens before it gets moved to the next, right? So we'll see how those uh, comes into play at every point in time, depending on what we want to achieve with that particular action. Okay, so at this point, I would want to request Rafael. Rafael, I just want to drop. I don't know. So I actually wanted to cancel today's class, but I said no. I need to come in because this is my first time. First impressions matter, right? So let me show up and just take that excuse. Then from tomorrow's class, the next week, we'll get to see, dive more deeper into how this could actually enhance and improve your work rate as an admin, as a team, a leader, as a business executive. You'll see how that comes into play from time to time. Yeah, hi, Rafa. Let me drop over. I don't know if you're still there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Stanley, for that wonderful presentation. We really appreciate you taking your time to show up for us. And yeah, that brings us to, I would say, the end. We're going to take your questions. I can see we have one or two questions in the chat. I'll quickly read that out and we can just reconvene tomorrow. Okay, I can see, yeah, for those raising up their hands, please just wait. Let me answer the questions in the chat first, then you can ask your questions. Someone is asking that, he wants to ask, is this Power Automate apps integrated into other softwares?
Okay, yeah. So it depends on what the software is, right? Because Power Automate has to also play with APIs, right? Application programming interfaces. So if that particular software has an API available for Power Automate to use, then yes. you would be able to integrate it.
Okay.
Yeah, because Microsoft generally they're trying to be very friendly with third-party applications. So if that the development team for that application has an API that we can call, right? Then yes, you can use that.
Okay. So someone else is asking for your LinkedIn profile. I don't know if you have that close by. You can just share the link. You don't have it, right? Or we can just give you some few minutes and you can share your LinkedIn profile URL with us in the chat. So for those raising up their hands, let me quickly unmute so you can speak.
Okay, so I just dropped my LinkedIn profile on the chat. So I don't know if I will still have access. Okay, yeah, I will still have access to this chat. If you have a question, drop it on the chat. I'll get to it later today.
Okay.
Once I'm done with my next engagement, I'll get to it later today, and I'll drop an answer or a link that would direct help you out with that. Just so sorry to cut the interaction short from my end. Really I apologize for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So if you have your questions, please, you can drop your questions in the chat. You'll still have access to them